Hi, I'm Rob Johnstone from Woodworker's Journal, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to build this small table. This is the second video in a series where I'm teaching building basics, with each project building on the techniques from the previous video. In the first video, I showed you how to build this step stool, where you learned how to cut things squarely to length and then use beadlock joinery to put the whole thing together. As in the first project, I'm going to start out by cutting the leg stock square and to length, creating 4 legs. Then I mark out 2 angled sections on the legs to add some shape to the legs. You can find the measurements for these angles in the downloadable plan in the link that is in the description below. Then use the same saw techniques you use to cut the legs square and to length to soft angles. Do this for each leg. In addition to cutting the legs to length and to their shape, you'll also need to cut out the aprons, as we demonstrated in our last video. You'll find their length in the material list in the downloadable plan. So now we have to join the aprons to the legs. In the last project, we used beadlock tenons. This time out, we'll use dowels. This jig will allow you to perfectly align the dowel holes in the legs and the aprons. The aprons are 3 inches wide, so I mark a line down 1.5 inches from the top of the leg. Use that line to align the jig and drill 2 dowel holes. I'm using 3/8 of an inch dowels here. In the same way, center the jig on the ends of the aprons and drill those holes. Repeat this on all the legs and the aprons. Okay, I'm going to set aside the legs and aprons right now, and we're going to move on to the solid wood tabletop. With the step stool, we used a piece of plywood for the top, which worked great. For this table, we are going to glue 3 pieces of solid wood together to make a solid mahogany tabletop. I got this lumber from Rockler, and it comes 3/4 of an inch thick, 5 inches wide, and 24 inches long, and it has straight edges. But the big question is, how straight are those edges really? We have to edge glue these pieces together, and we really want the edges to touch along their whole length, as gaps will be visible. As you can see here, these edges meet nicely, but what if they did not? There's a few ways that you can straighten these edges so that they'll meet properly. You can use a jointer, you can use a hand plane, or even a table saw, but we're using a minimum of tools in this series, so I'm going to show you a technique that anyone can do. Put 2 edges against each other and make a pencil mark where the edges touch. With the piece clamped to the table, use this square piece of leg material and a sanding block. Using the leg material to keep the block square to the surface of the mahogany, sand away the area you marked with the pencil. Put the 2 edges together once more, and again mark the areas where the edges touch. Be sure to keep the edges square. As you repeat this process, you will remove the wood until the whole edge touches. Mark the matching edges with a triangle so you can place them accurately for glue up. Hopefully your edges will align nicely and you can avoid that whole process, but you never know. Now it's time to glue these boards together. Set up 2 clamps like so and put the boards on top. Gently clamp them together to test the fit. Now apply glue to the edges of the boards. A thin coat of glue on each face is what you want. Assemble the boards and put the center clamp on the glue up and gently tighten. Tighten the remaining clamps and allow the glue to dry. You will have noticed that you've got a little bit of glue squeezing out of the joints. That's good because it tells you have the right amount of glue in those joints. Wait till it gets rubbery, and then you can use a putty knife, a scraper, or a chisel to remove it. When the glue cures, in an hour or so, it's time to flatten the board. The good news is you've successfully glued up a tabletop. The not as good news is that there are slight differences between the boards where they're glued together, and we've got to get rid of them. We'll do that by hand sanding. Start the process with 60 grit sandpaper wrapped around the sanding block. Sand diagonally across the glued up panel until the tabletop is flat. You need to do it to both faces. Move up to 80 grit paper and sand in the opposite diagonal until you've replaced the 60 grit sanding marks with 80 grit marks. Now move to 100 grit paper and switch diagonals again. With each change in paper, you are simply getting rid of the previous grit's sanding marks. Move up to 120 grit and do it again. With the change to 150 grit paper, you start sanding the long way on the panel. This is called with the grain. And again, remove the previous sanding marks. Go to 180 grit and sand with the grain. You now not only flattened the panel, but sanded it smooth enough to apply a clear finish. That would have gone a lot faster, obviously, with the power sander, but really, it didn't take too long. Now, we've got almost all of our parts made. We're gonna get ready and do a try fit. A critical part of every woodworking project is a test fit or dry assembly. Putting together your sub-assemblies without glue to make sure that all is ready to be glued together. When that is done, it's time to glue and clamp up the leg and apron sub-assembly. As we did with the step stool project, we will glue together 2 legs and a long apron. Clamp them up and then do that one more time. I use a glue brush to apply the glue in the dowel holes and on the ends of the aprons. When that is done, we join the 2 sub-assemblies with the short aprons and clamp them together. As we allow the glue to cure on the leg sub-assembly, we have just a few more things to do, and then we'll be finished. First, we need to square up the ends of the tabletop. Mark square lines across each end, and then saw the waste away. With that done, smooth the edges and ends with sandpaper. Now it's time to make the angle braces. You can see them here, and they do 2 things. First, they add some strength to the apron and leg sub-assembly, but they also give us a great way to attach this glued up top to the leg set. Start by ripping the remaining 3-inch wide stock down the middle to make 1.5-inch pieces. Cut those pieces to 6.5 inches long. Mark them at 45 degrees and cut their ends on the line. You need 4 of these pieces. Next, drill holes at their ends as you see here. With that done, you need to install them in the leg set. Clamp them in place and drive the screws into the aprons. Now we have to drill 4 holes in order to be able to use screws to attach the tabletop to the leg set. But we can't just drill round holes and be done. As you know, we glued up a solid wood tabletop. And solid wood will expand and contract with seasonal changes. The term is hygroscopic, which means that the wood will absorb moisture from the air. And no, I'm not making this up. You know, there's a saying in woodworking, there are 3 things that you can't avoid: death, taxes, and wood movement. And for that reason, we need to drill elongated holes. We do this by drilling 3 holes next to each other, and then angle the drill bit to ream out the wood fibers between the holes. So that's it. Now it's just a matter of securing the tabletop to the leg set with screws, and you're done. Of course, you're gonna need to think about how you're gonna finish it. I used tung oil on the top and painted the legs. Our second project in Building Basics Woodworking series is done. In this project, you learned how to shape wood with a saw. You learned how to glue together a solid wood tabletop. You learned the proper way to flatten it, and you learned about wood movement and one way to accommodate it. I'm Rob Johnstone from Woodworkers Journal. Thanks for watching, and keep on making sawdust.